Please join us every week for a new episode of Understanding the Human Condition with Dr. James Flowers. Dr. Flowers and his most admired mentors, respected colleagues, and VIP guests will share valuable insight into underlying health causes, conditions, and issues. These in-depth yet approachable episodes are a great resource for both private individuals and industry professionals. Our esteemed host, Dr. James Flowers, is one of the most recognized and respected names in the field of chronic pain, mental health, and substance use disorders, both nationally and internationally. Dr. Flowers is the founder of J. Flowers Health Institute, located in Houston, Texas. For more information about J. Flowers Health Institute and its concierge services, go to jflowershealth.com or dial 713-783-6655. And be sure to mention this podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to Understanding the Human Condition with our host, Dr. James Flowers.
Hey, Robin.
Hey, James.
How are you?
I called you James instead of Dr. Flowers.
Oh.
We discussed that just a little bit ago.
It is absolutely fine. Either I answer to James or Dr. Flowers.
We have a special guest. Would you like to?
Yeah, Dr. Drew Krieger. My goodness, now I can't speak.
I know.
Dr. Andrew Krieger. I call
Andrew,
you Drew
you
most
do.
of the time.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Flowers.
Yeah.
Real privilege.
Thank you. I'm so happy that you're here. You know, we have a great professional working relationship and a great friendship, and I've worked with you guys and Contemporary Medicine Associates for quite a few years now. You guys are one of the most respected, really, I'm going to call it an addiction treatment practice in Houston. And I'm going to ask you in just a minute to tell us more about it. But, you know, I was Dr. Degner was always a mentor of mine, as he probably was of yours and so many people in Houston. And it's just an honor to have you here. So,
No, thank you.
yeah, absolutely.
I have a little bio about you. Can I read it real quick?
Sure.
Yeah.
Dr. Drew Krieger is currently the CEO at Contemporary Medicine Associates here in Houston. He's a mental health and technology executive. Dr. Krieger has held various clinical positions at leading addiction treatment programs. He earned his doctorate from the University of Southern California and specializes in addictive disorders, family therapy, and process addictions. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Robin.
Nice to have you again. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your journey really in this addiction treatment world that you're in with us, and where you came from and kind of where you are today, and what inspired you to treat addictive disorders as a profession, and how has it really affected your own human condition?
Sure. Well, like most people who are in the addiction treatment field, I have a personal connection to it.
Sure.
And in my instance, it was my own issues with substances.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened, and you probably remember what life was like in the late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And it was the Wild West.
Yes, it was.
And so here I am, 22 years old. It's 1992.
Right.
And I have zero clinical experience. I am a college student in sociology, and actually George Joseph, who you know,
Yep.
He was working at Parkside Lodge out in Katy, which
Got it.
was Dr. Degner's treatment center.
That's right.
And we were out at dinner, and he said, "Hey, you're in college, right? You want a job?" And this is no exaggeration. It was literally showing up.
Is that right?
And it was like, okay, here's the bathroom, here's the cafeteria, and you have a group of 3.
There you go. Yeah. Go see these patients. Yeah.
And I've often kind of thought, geez, what were the ethical and legal?
Exactly,
Taking
back then.
a group of adolescents outside from a locked unit,
Absolutely.
doing an experiential group with no licensure.
Yeah,
right?
exactly, yeah.
But there was a lot of kind of Wild West.
Yeah.
And as I progressed in the field, actually got licensed, I was in the first batch of LCDCs. There were CADACs back then,
Yep.
and a lot of them grandfathered in, and I was hyper ethical and gung-ho, and I said, no, I'm not going to grandfather in. I'm going to do it right.
Go do the
you know,
courses, yeah.
Years and 3,000 hours later, I was thinking, geez, maybe I should have, grandfathered in.
Exactly. Right.
But I finally graduated, and I came to this place where I thought, if I'm going to do this, I really need to be more sophisticated than using confrontation and self-disclosure.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I really need to actually learn the craft. So I spent some really honest to goodness time researching it, talking to mentors, seeking it out. And I charted a course. I chose, for people that don't know, really, as a psychotherapist, there are two principal paths. There's the psychology and the social work path, and they're dissimilar and similar in lots of ways. And I thought, you know what, social work is sort of aligned with how I view the world. I liked the terminal degree being at the master's level, and I really thought, okay, I'll go get a master's in social work, become a clinician, and then I will go get a PhD in psychology.
There you go.
And I'll be an academic researcher,
That's right.
therapist.
Yeah.
So anyway, long story longer, I got wonderful clinical training. I mean, I did my internships at Methodist and Baylor College of Medicine, which were sister hospitals at the time. I guess they're blood enemies now.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But back then, they were really friendly.
That's right.
And Bob Beck, who a lot of people in Houston know,
Sure.
he was a wonderful mentor, as Gene Degner was. And I came out really wanting to do this. Now, just out on total fluke, I was starting a family. My wife and I had been together a while, but we started having kids after grad school, et cetera. And what happened was I started looking at the market, which had been totally decimated by managed care in the 90s. So managed care hit Houston really in earnest about 92, 93.
Right.
I watched Parkside shut down 200 hospitals nationally.
I saw that.
I was, we all migrated as a treatment team, as treatment teams do.
That's right.
And wound up with a hospital system that was really early adopter in managed care.
Right.
But I'm sitting here going, boy, I think this is absolutely true. I may have exaggerated it in my mind over the years, but I recall spending 3 hours certifying 2 1-hour therapy sessions.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, if that's exaggerating, I apologize, but at
That's
least
all
in my
right.
mind, that was an absolute fact. And I thought, geez, this is a hard way to make a living. The market had completely changed.
Yeah.
And so I thought I better just get an MBA as a backup.
Right.
And so I did. U of H had started a concurrent program, and I was actually the third student to complete the
Wow.
And an MBA and an MSW were like oil and water, right?
Absolutely.
It really was a
Yep.
schizophrenic experience. But what happened was I graduated and I was all set, and I got a job offer from Compaq out of the blue.
Yep.
Completely unsolicited, just out of the blue. And so I left the field. I left the field for 13 years. I was very fortunate. I was able to work for big companies and kind of fast track and really kind of be at the ground level at a lot.
I was going to say early on with Compaq.
Well, Compaq, which I was there when they were bought by HP, and then I was at a big audio company. We did all of Apple's audio, and so then got involved in consumer products, retail products, and then wound up in banking software.
Wow.
And so really an interesting, exciting career, and I sort of left the clinical behind. Well, 10 years ago, I reconnected with the Degners, and I was exiting a software startup, and I wound up back in and rekindled the passion. So.
That's amazing. And speaking of software, or you know what, I'm going to pause for a second and talk about your degree in social work.
Sure.
And what recently happened in the state of Texas. I'm sure you're aware.
Yes.
With the social work board. Tell me your thoughts on the social work board unanimously voting to really, I guess, be able to discriminate against LGBT community and also people with disabilities. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's somewhat shocking, and I'm not just looking at it through my own personal lens. I mean, I have 2 LGBTQ family members, a daughter and a sister-in-law. So this is a very personal issue for me. I found out about this, oddly enough, through former students, colleagues who started sending me texts saying, "Could you believe this?"
Right.
And I think in Texas, there's some. I'm a Texas boy. I really am. I grew up here. A lot of those stereotypes exist for a reason.
Sure.
I'm very passionate about
Yep.
that. But one thing I'm really not proud of is we really show up at the bottom of the tier on social justice issues.
We do. Yeah.
And where I am a capitalist, I do believe in a free market society. I do believe in self-determination. There is a need for a safety net, for consideration, to serve underserved populations.
I agree.
And so for me, I'm not at the front lines politically. I'm not in the streets. I'm not a political social worker.
Right.
But I have to tell you, when I saw that, I was just sort of stunned.
Yeah.
Right.
And the reason I was stunned is if for me, it's just so hard to make this leap to go, well, that's a class of people that don't need some kind of protection.
Absolutely. That's right.
And so again, I would bill myself as a moderate. I was in California. I think I was probably a real right-winger to California people.
Sure.
Probably in Texas, I think I'm a crazy liberal.
There you go. Yeah.
But the truth is, I think there's a bit of, I mean, frankly, I feel quite alienated in the current political environment. I really do not identify with the polar extremes, right or left.
Right.
And so I've also, as you have, I've dedicated myself to a helping profession.
Yeah.
And a lot of treating addicts is about serving an underserved population, serving people with mental health conditions medically. We take great pride in that. That's an underserved population. Having a social consciousness, including race, sexual orientation, identity, etc. This is what I think is required to be in this line of work.
I couldn't agree more. What do you think, Drew, people should do that are listening? Write letters to the social work board, write letters to whom? What do you think we can do as a society?
Yeah, I think it starts with your personal space, meaning, you can treat people kindly and respectfully and with some understanding. And most of that, to me, is a near-field game. I mean, the truth is even in our roles, we are not on the presidential panel.
Right, exactly.
And I think, I don't mean to sound like it's a calling, but to me, it's a very personal thing. There are some people, it really is about advocacy, and I think that's important.
Right.
And if that's your thing, become educated first. And then rather than just standing outside screaming into the wind, how about try to find an effective way to operate within the system? This is a little bit of a digression, but it'll make the point. I had a professor in my master's program, Dr. Applewhite, and I really liked him. We used to have a lot of fun with him. But he and I had kind of a running debate through 2 classes, about a semester and a half. And his theory was, you really have to confront the system. That's a pretty typical social worker
Sure
view.
is. That's right. Yep.
And I said, well, I think there is a time and a place for that. My father's people were, Minnesota coal miners out of Germany. They carried, you could see their gun holsters on their mining belts going down into the basement, right? So you just can imagine what that was like with union busters and the condition. So there's a time to fight the system,
right? But
there's also a time to consolidate gains and to work within the system. And he and I kind of had a friendly. Well, interestingly enough, my first job over at Compact, I'm a middle management plebe.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And it was a flat organization, but make no mistake, I was not steering Compact to greatness. I was a cog in the machine. Okay?
Sure.
Entry position. And my boss's wife had a pet project with some society for the blind thing. And I think they'd gone to a gala. And it got turfed. This is how important it was to that guy. It got turfed down 5 management layers, and it winds up on my desk.
Right.
So my boss says, "Hey, go fix this." So
Okay.
and it was I forget the name of the nonprofit, but there was a Braille society. They were converting keyboards. It was a nonprofit, and it was for people who were seeing disabled to be able to convert regular keyboards to Braille keyboards.
Got it.
And the fact was that the technology has shifted, and none of the new keyboards would work. And there was an old Compact keyboard that was kind of a legacy keyboard that would have worked.
Right.
And what I was able to do, I was able to deliver them. They had asked for like a couple hundred. I wound up finding this factory in the middle of nowhere with a warehouse that we had all these backstock, and I pulled some strings by calling out the general manager of the division's name. I'm waving his name around, and I basically shipped them it was ridiculous, 10,000 keyboards, right? Just something. And anyway, they sent this lovely letter, and I of course gave the senior executive one for his wife. But I remember I emailed that to Dr. Applewhite, right?
Yeah,
kind of like I told you
so. Yeah.
So anyway, I think there is a case to be made by working within and without, and I think it's how can you be? For me, it's always how can I be effective, and what do I actually connect to?
Right. That's right.
You know, I mean, frankly, I'm not a marcher. I'm just not.
Yeah.
There are people who are called to do that, and I think it's a good thing. But you know what? I can guarantee you that I take great pains to make sure that somebody feels not only not judged but comfortable.
Right.
And I do advocacy in my own way, usually when it's in front of me.
Absolutely. Thank you for your perspective on that. That means a lot. So let's talk a little bit about technology transforming mental health. And Robin French and I were just talking before the podcast saying, well, we are not technology gurus.
We are not.
We're not technology gurus, but
Nope.
I think that Drew is going to educate us a little bit. This is such an important topic, though, especially this year, right, with COVID.
Yeah.
It's focused us ready to develop technological infrastructure.
Yep.
Let's start there. How is technology radically transforming this industry?
Well, if you're a tech nerd like I am, this is an amazing time.
Yeah.
And as we talked a little bit before we went live, this field, the mental health field, literally went from very, very low to no adoption of what we would call patient-facing technology. So that would mean technology that a clinician is using to treat a mental health patient.
Got it.
There's some, you have always neurofeedback, biofeedback. But in terms of adoption, the largest provider in the country for private psych hospitals is still using paper charts.
Is that right?
Just to put it in
Wow.
perspective, okay, which is kind of mind-blowing.
It is.
But medical has been on a forced march to technology adoption. It started with electronic health records, medical records, and there is a lot of startups, private equity capital, VC capital, really trying to port technology. And keep in mind, the way you and I view it is probably a little different because we're in mental health treatment.
Right.
But for most people, mental health is a subset of medical. And then I would argue addiction is a subset of mental health.
Sure.
So we could, if we wanted to be snarky, we say we're stepchildren.
Yeah, there you go.
If we want to be, but it's a niche.
Yep.
It's a niche
It
service, and so adoption tends to trickle from the middle down, into the cul-de-sacs, right? And so what we experienced with COVID-19 was literally an overnight, almost 100% adoption. To a patient-facing technology
Immediately.
I mean, and it was like wasn't there, and then everybody's doing it.
Right. Yeah.
And where that gets exciting, so we can spend the next 8 hours, of course, in this podcast talking about this, which I'm excited to do.
Yeah.
But the reality is this: whether you are a technophobe, an unenlightened, a tech, non-native. I promise that you have adopted a lot of technology and probably aren't really even aware of what that means.
Right.
So as I asked you, I asked you guys, do you guys have an iPhone?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you are holding more computing power in your hand than what it took for them to land a spacecraft on the moon, right?
Amazing. Yeah.
And the heavy lifting is done in the hardware, in the software, in the algorithms. And so I'll give you just kind of I'll try to make it a little brief, but a two-part answer to that. One, I had this kind of wild awareness, and I was taking my kids, I think, to a Star Wars movie, and I had ordered tickets on one of the online services, which I had not done really that much before.
Right.
And so I don't know, pick a service. It was like Fandango or something. Yeah. And so I order it, and what was interesting to me, this was on my PC. So it's a PC sitting at home in a home office.
Right.
And I think we went to the opening weekend on a Sunday early show. Okay, so we're going, let's say 9 o'clock. Well, I pick up my phone, and literally my phone suggests, click here, and it will map my path to the theater. And even more than that, I'm starting to get suggestions on places to eat lunch.
Wow.
So what does that imply? That implies A, this device was talking to that device. B, it knew I was going to a movie. C, it knew I was probably going to need to eat lunch after that movie. So it's providing this useful function, and it's marketing, and it's really, in a lot of ways, manipulating my behavior.
Sure.
Okay. Well, wait a second. I mean, that's great. Maybe Melina's got an extra lunch. Maybe the iPhone got a nickel for me doing that.
Right.
Whatever. but couldn't we use that same basic process, which already exists? And you and I are both, whether we were aware of it or not, we were adopting that in our lives as normal.
Right.
Couldn't we use that for social good ethically to help people manage a chronic mental health condition like addiction?
Right.
And so where I think this is going, how will it transform it? Right now we have adoption, but under the hood, what I think we'll start seeing, before this year, most of the apps were kind of clinically informed, but very few in any widespread use. I mean, outside of academic realms or certain niches, were really integrated with a clinical process. But by the way, with the normalization of technology, the natural kind of next step is to start integrating technology into clinical process. Now, as you know, the first thing we're trained, as I shared with you, my daughter's a sophomore clinical psychology major, so I'm having a lot of psychology 101 conversations, But the first thing they train you about charting is it has to be observable and measurable. And by the way, if it's observable and measurable, it can be digitized.
Got it.
And if it can be digitized, you can apply machine learning. And then you can apply big data. And where a computer is terrible at telling you, it's hard for a computer to say this is a dog and that's a cat. It is awesome at taking lots of data, looking at patterns, and then managing behavioral patterns. Okay, so in other words, you can port an entire clinical process into the digital space.
Sure.
And it creates access, it creates visibility, it creates efficiencies, and I think you could actually start tying interventions to outcomes ultimately, which is unbelievably exciting to me.
I can't wait to continue to follow that. And are you doing this as a part of Contemporary Medicine Associates, or is that?
Well, Contemporary Medicine was Gene Degner's private practice, as you mentioned. I've been involved. I'm a partner and owner in that company, and we do medical services for mental health providers, large psychiatric hospitals. We do addiction medicine, various levels. We do consulting and business development within mental health and addiction. And we have a private practice in Bel Air where we see a lot, it's a safe place for a person at any stage in addiction or recovery to come and receive really good medical and mental health care. Yeah. So that's really our wheelhouse. Now that said, principally because of my focus and my background and my interest, not within the four corners of contemporary medicine, but my business partners and practice partner within contemporary medicine, we obviously are involved in all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely.
Which also includes I launched a technology company which we're about I believe to exit, but I've really been trying to put together a production or working prototype which integrates evidence-based clinical practices, medical behavioral, with technology within a continuum of care.
Right. Yeah.
And where I don't have here's concrete funding, here's a concrete project.
Right.
I mean, as I mentioned to you, I did my whole doctorate basically on this premise.
Sure. Yeah. I need to read that.
I'll send you a copy if you need some sleep.
Yeah,
they put you right to bed.
Exactly. So at Contemporary Medicine Associates, you guys do you do psychiatry as well?
We don't actually. We at one time in our life had a couple of psychiatrists, but we do. Dr. Boiler, who's my practice partner, who you know very well.
Absolutely.
He's clinical director at your treatment program.
That's right.
He is a boarded family practice medicine doctor. He's a boarded addiction medicine doctor. So we're medical model people.
Yeah.
Now there's a little bit of an overlap. An addictionologist does do a fair amount of psych.
Right.
But acute decompensated psych, we would refer to a psychiatrist.
Got it.
But we do everything medical and behavioral in our private practice.
Right. Got it.
A lot of assessment, a lot of referral, that kind of stuff. A lot of treatment.
Yeah, no, I love working with Dr. Allaire. He's an amazing addictionologist, and you guys just do an outstanding job at Contemporary. It's such a needed niche here in Houston that there's not a lot. I really, quite frankly, don't know of another practice similar to yours.
No, thank you. And, when Dr. Degner approached me 10 years ago, his goal was not to make more money or to cash out. His goal was to keep the brain trust going and keep the practice going. And it really was what your observation. It was, there are not a lot of people who specialize in that.
Right.
And as you've seen, I mean, you're obviously one of the real experts on addiction and pain, and certainly in our community.
Thank you.
And nationally, Well, there aren't a lot of guys like you or me or Dr. Allaire.
Right.
And what makes people like us crazy is we see patients who have been seeing what appear to be good practitioners, and they come in with a fistful of benzos or a fistful of opiates
Absolutely.
or contraindicated medications
Sure.
or approaches, and they're literally dying in front of practitioners.
Yeah.
And you know, I think one of the big signs of ethics and maturity as a clinician is knowing when to refer.
Absolutely.
You know, there are certain cases I could probably figure it out, but I don't see 20 PTSD patients a week.
No.
And a
Right.
severely
Yeah.
decompensating PTSD
Right.
patient does not need to meet with me.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, well, I do see 20 plus addiction patients in a week. And so I think the mark of a really good clinician is knowing what you do and what you don't do,
That's right.
and when to refer.
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
you know, what
Yeah.
keeps us going, it was exactly your observation. It's
Yeah.
we're very passionate about this, and I mean, this is kind of funny. I've tried to get out of the addiction part of this field probably 5 or 6 times.
Sure.
And what keeps pulling me back, I honestly, I'm like, you know what? I don't see 4 people behind me kind of stepping in.
Right. You're exactly right.
Wow.
Yeah. And that collaborative approach that you guys have, I think, is the shared philosophy that we have. And it's so nice and refreshing to work with a practice that has this collaborative approach, knowing that 2, 3, 4 minds are so much better than one, and really looking at the whole body system and helping patients understand what their human condition is.
Well, and that's a great segue for. We wanted to take this down to a personal level too, just to find out a little bit more about you and like, where's your happy place? What gives you joy?
Yeah, I guess I could answer that in different ways throughout my life, but I could tell you right now, very family devoted. I think if you grow up in Texas, but generally speaking, so a lot of my life revolves around that. I've really kind of left an academic life. I'm kind of a cerebral person, but you know, personal passions. I've always been a theater guy. I mean, I think one thing, Dr. Flowers, you and I share, love of opera,
That's
love of
right.
theater. You know, which I haven't. Neither of us have been to probably.
Not this year.
And
Yeah.
At least since February. Yeah.
strangely enough, there's nothing more zealous than like the recently converted, and so I was really not a college football guy. And going to USC, somebody said, you know, they have a great college football team. And now I've gone rabid. I mean, I literally put on the shirt. I've got a shirt for my
Right.
dog, as embarrassing as that is. I watch all
that.
I go to the games when they're nearby.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. And so I was excited when Pac-12 announced they were going to have a
That's
season
right.
in February.
Yeah.
I mean, in November. It's
Yep.
like Eureka! You know? I have a lot of passions, whether it's reading
Yeah.
or travel or, you know, and so my wife and I are sort of excited. Our kids are now almost launched. We've got 2
Good
high
for
school
you.
juniors who are
Congratulations.
twins.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we have a sophomore in college. And so a lot of what we're doing is enjoying this time while they're kind of an adult and kind
Yep.
of still in our orbit.
You
And
realize the clock's ticking?
and so, you know, on the work side, what really, I really, truly, you know, here's what I found. You talk about the human condition. You know, for me, I feel the most human when I'm integrated from the standpoint of more or less how I think, how I feel, and how I act is somewhat lined up, regardless of role, right?
Yeah.
So am I the same person sitting here with you as going home, talking to my wife, as meeting with a patient, albeit different roles?
Yeah.
Right.
But is there that presence and that integration? And honestly, what I have found, and some of this is sort of a recovering principle, but some of this is personal, I guess, life philosophy, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
When I can get out of my personal agenda and really dial into what can I bring to this instead of what can I take? You know, how
Good
can
for
I
you.
help rather
Yeah.
than what's my angle? It's not
That's
that
awesome.
you don't advocate for those things, but it's if your focal point is what you bring to something, what I found is I connect to it in a different way. And oddly enough, I mean, again, sound business practices aside, what I found is the other things kind of take care of themselves. So honestly, this stint with Gene Degner before he retired about 3 years ago, and with my current business partners, a vast majority of my conscious time is about what can I, how do I help these people I'm meeting with in terms of
That's
patients?
awesome.
How do I bring value to my business partners? How do I grow this business to help people? And you know, from a human standpoint, I sleep great at night.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You know, I really
Yeah.
do. And I'm very fortunate. I'm very privileged to have the life I have and to get to do what I enjoy doing. This life I have, somebody else might be bored to death. I think my brother, who's an adrenaline junkie, would look at my life and go, geez,
Sure.
But for me, this is the life I chose.
Yeah.
Right?
And you're living your best life.
Well, and it does kind of boil down, to your own self be true within that. And so what I find is when I'm coming from that place, when I'm sitting here with you, I'm with you. I'm not in my past or my future.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you
right
can
here,
tell.
right
It
now.
shows.
We always say. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, we are running out of time. We
Yeah.
have 2 minutes left.
All right.
Is there anything that you can share with us that we haven't covered that's important to you?
No, I guess all I would say, and I want to give Dr. Flowers the last word since this is his podcast, but what I would say is, again, what a privilege. I really was so looking forward to just having some in-person time. I've been pretty appropriately socially distanced.
That's right.
I've got my mask.
Your
and
USC mask.
So it's just so nice to sit in a room with people and have a conversation.
That's right.
And people of like mind.
Yeah.
And so thank you so
Absolutely.
much. It was a real privilege.
You know what? Thank you for being here. It's been a difficult year for so many people. You guys bring a lot of health to people. Keep bringing health to people. Keep being a big part of our Houston recovery community, really in our wellness community. And thank you for collaborating with us all the time, both at the treatment centers and J Flowers Health. And appreciate you being here. So all the best to you.
And if folks want to reach you, how do they reach you?
Contemporary medicine.
My website, I'm happy to, if you our website is www.cmamed.com, so our acronym med.com.
Okay.
If you Google us, you'll find us. I'd be happy. I'll give you my personal email address. I don't do any clinical communications over it, obviously, for HIPAA, but if somebody wants to reach out, it's drewkrieger@yahoo.com. And if anybody reaches out to you and wants to get a hold of me, you're more than happy to give them my cell phone information.
Thank you.
There you go. Thanks for being here. Have a great week. Yep.
Right.
You too.
Yep.
Thanks.
Dr. Flowers, if somebody wants to reach you, where do they go?
Certainly they can go to www.jflowershealth.com, or you can call our office at 713-783-6655.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Robin.
Have a good afternoon.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Bye.